The night I was supposed to find my mate, I got publicly rejected by my own alpha. Then, in front of the entire pack, he grabbed me and snarled that I belonged to him. I stood there in the pack circle, the ground hard under my feet. The torchlight made the shadows dance. I tried to look calm. My friend Chloe watched from the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide. Her worry was a knot in my stomach. This was supposed to be a hopeful night, but the alpha's silence felt wrong. Kalen Thorne stepped forward. He was huge with these intense amber eyes. He held the silver dagger. He didn't look at me like he knew me. This was just a duty. He took my left hand. His grip was firm, his skin warm. That warmth sent a confusing flicker through my chest. He turned my palm up toward the moon. Then he cut me. The pain was sharp. My blood welled up in my hand, dark in the torchlight. The scent hit the air, coppery and strong. Kalen's whole body went rigid. He dropped the dagger. It clattered on the stone. A low sound started deep in his chest. He stared at my bleeding hand with a wild look. "I reject this bond," he said. His voice was flat, cold. The words were a public slap. Humiliation burned my face. I tried to pull my hand back. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was too tight. He looked from my blood to my face, and his expression just shattered. A raw snarl tore from his throat. He yanked me against his chest, smearing my blood on his skin. He turned to the shocked pack and shouted, "She's mine." Why the smell of my blood made him do that, I had no idea, but it wasn't going away. My palm throbbed. I stumbled into a quiet grove, pressing my back against a pine tree. The cold seeped through my shirt. I just needed the world to stop spinning. Then I heard his footsteps. Kalen stepped into the clearing. He moved slowly, his shoulders slumped. He stopped a few feet away. The scent of rain on pine filled the space between us. He looked at my hand. The blood had dried in a dark line. "You ran," he said. His voice was ragged. "You humiliated me," I said. My voice shook. "You cut me. You claimed me like property in front of everyone." He didn't deny it. He ran a hand over his face. For a second, he just looked tired. "I tried to reject the bond," he said. The words just came out, flat and true. "When your blood hit the air, I tried to push it away." I stared at him. I waited for the lie. It didn't come. His face was pale. "What happened?" I asked. His mouth tightened. He looked at his own hands. "It felt like my ribs were cracking inward," he said. He just let that sit there, raw, honest. It was a crack in his alpha stone. I saw it. I didn't know what it meant. I took a half step forward. My body did it before my mind could stop it. He saw the movement. His head lifted. His eyes met mine. There was no command there, just a look. It held the whole silent, awful truth. We stood there, close but not touching. The air was thick with everything we didn't say. I could feel the warmth of him. I could see a scar across his chest, peeking above his shirt. We just stood in the quiet in that almost moment. The rest made sense. Why that scar across his chest looked so old didn't. Back in my cabin, Chloe cleaned the cut on my palm. Her hands were steady, but her face was tight. "The patrols have doubled since sunset," she said, not looking up. "They're not just guarding the border anymore." I knew what she meant. It was about me. It was about keeping a rival alpha from trying to steal his alpha's new claim. The thought made my stomach twist. I pulled my good hand through my tangled hair and felt a sharp pull on my scalp. "I never asked for this," I said. My voice was thin in the quiet cabin. "Any of it." Chloe finally met my eyes. Her blue eyes were full of a protective guilt I knew too well. She had brought me into this world, thinking it was just stories. She opened her mouth to say something, but then her eyes dropped to my hand. Her breath caught. The shallow cut across my palm was closing. The raw edges were knitting together before our eyes. A faint, warm tingling spread up my arm. It was the bond, active and working against the silver's poison. The power was not mine to command. It was his, flowing into me, fixing what he had broken. And real quick, if you're here to see what happens when an alpha's control finally snaps, hit subscribe. Because that moment is coming. Heavy footfalls crunched on the gravel path outside. Then another. Chloe's hand clamped over my mouth before I could make a sound. Her other hand doused the candle flame. We were plunged into total darkness. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I could hear the rough texture of someone's breathing through the thin wood. My own heart beat hard against my ribs. The warm tingling in my hand turned into a sudden, deep pull. It was a cord yanking tight behind my breastbone. It pointed toward the door, toward him. I knew who was out there without seeing him. The bond knew. The unnatural warmth from my healing palm still pulsed against my thigh. I stepped out onto the creaking porch boards. Kalen Thorne stood at the bottom of my steps. His large frame blocked the path into the woods. He looked up at me and I saw a new detail. A small muscle jumped near the corner of his left eye. It was a tight, restless movement. "You need to come with me now," he said. His voice was flat. It was a command. "The bond is active. Staying here alone is a danger to you and your friend." "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said. My own voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You don't get to order me around after what you did." He took one step up. The old wood groaned under his weight. "This isn't a request, Alara. Roderick Vancourt knows you're unclaimed. My patrols are securing the border, but they can't be everywhere." He lifted his hand. For a second, I thought he would grab me. Instead, he pointed a finger at my chest. His knuckles were white. "Your defiance has consequences beyond this porch." Just then, Chloe burst from the tree line. She was breathing hard. "Alara," she shouted. She skidded to a stop when she saw Kalen. Her face went pale, but she didn't back down. She looked from him to me. "The new patrols, your orders. They attacked a human logger on the South Ridge." Kalen's head turned toward her. His expression didn't change. "The borders are closed. He was trespassing." "His name is Ben," Chloe's voice cracked. She took a shaky step forward. Her hands were fists at her sides. "He's my brother. He was collecting herbs like he always does. Your wolves didn't ask questions. They tore into him. He's at the clinic now. He might lose his leg." She stared at Kalen, her blue eyes wide with a kind of terrified anger. Then she looked at me. "This is because of you, because he's trying to protect you." I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Kalen. The muscle near his eye kept jumping. His right hand came up almost absently and pressed against the center of his chest. His fingers spread over the fabric of his shirt, right where I knew the old claw mark scar was. He didn't look at Chloe. He only looked at me. His amber eyes held something I couldn't name. It wasn't regret. It was the weight of a choice already made, a long time ago. The heat of my outrage still simmered like a fever just beneath my skin. I walked until I reached the familiar clearing, where the first evening stars were piercing the dark between the black pine branches. The quiet was heavy here. I sat on the cold ground and pressed my forehead to my knees. I wanted the anger to stay. It was better than the other feeling, the one that pulled me toward the door after Kalen left. A twig snapped behind me. I knew his scent before I turned. Kalen Thorne stood at the tree line. He did not move closer. His shoulders were set in a hard line. But his hands were open at his sides, not clenched. The usual command in his posture was missing. He just stood there, watching me. I waited for him to speak first. He did not. "Why are you here?" I finally asked. My voice sounded thin in the quiet clearing. He took a step forward, then stopped. "I felt you leave." He said it like a fact, not a threat. "The pull, it is a physical line. I followed it without thinking." He looked away from me, up at the stars. His throat worked as he swallowed. "It hurts more when I fight it, when I walk away." I stared at him. This was the crack. The high-handed alpha did not admit to pain. He did not confess to being pulled. My anger wavered. "What does it feel like?" I asked, against my better judgment. He was silent for a long moment. "Like a hook behind my ribs," he said, his voice low. "A constant, dull pull toward you. When I denied it back at the cabin, it felt like the hook was tearing through muscle." He looked at me then. His eyes held no pride, only a raw honesty he had not planned to give. "My control is breaking, piece by piece. So let me ask you, when the person who's supposed to protect you is the one causing all the pain, what's the right thing to do? Stick around for the next part and find out." He moved then, closing the distance between us in 3 slow strides. He stopped an arm's length away. The evening air was cool, but the space between us felt warm. I didn't step back. He didn't step forward. We just stood there, caught. What he'd said under his breath earlier echoed in my head. I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. The clearing had gone full dark. Kalen stood a few feet away now, his face tilted up toward the moon. The raw man from moments before was gone. He was just a tall shape against the trees again. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. Whatever I felt, it might just be the bond talking. So I took a step back toward the path to Chloe's. The crunch of my boot on a dry branch was loud in the quiet. A slow clap echoed from the trees. A man stepped into the clearing. It was Roderick Vancourt. His silver ring gleamed in the weak light. "A touching scene," he said. His voice was smooth and cold. "The mighty Alpha, brought low by a human, and alone." He looked right at me. His gray eyes tracked me like I was a thing on a shelf. "This is your great plan, Thorne, coddling your weakness in the dark." Kalen turned. His movement was slow and deliberate. The vulnerable stillness from before was gone. Every line of him was rigid with control. "You overstep, Roderick," he said. His voice was low, but it carried. The affairs of my mate are not your concern. They are when they make you weak, Roderick shot back. He took another step into the clearing. Patrols are getting sloppy, an alpha whimpering over a bond. The pack smells blood in the water, Kalen. They'll follow strength. He smiled, and it was all teeth. I'm just here to offer her a better deal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was scared. My breath came in short, sharp pulls. I looked at Kalen. His hand went to the center of his chest, right over his heart. He didn't press it. He just left it there, flat and still. He looked at Roderick for a long second. He didn't blink, then he dropped his hand. You think to challenge me here, now? I think your judgment is compromised, Roderick said. He spread his hands. I'm doing the pack a service, starting by taking what you're too soft to hold. His eyes cut back to me. The promise in them was clear. I was the prize. Kalen moved then. It was so fast I barely saw it. He placed himself between Roderick and me. His broad back blocked my view. The forest air went thick with a silent pressure. You will not speak to her, Kalen said. His voice had changed. It was deeper, rougher. It was the voice from the ceremony. You will not look at her. You will leave this territory. Now. Roderick's smile didn't fade. Or what? You'll fight me while you're split in two by the bond? He laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. I don't think you can. Kalen didn't answer. He just stood there, a solid wall. I saw the tight cord of muscle in the side of his neck. He was holding on. He was holding everything in. For a second, I saw the cost of it. The man was still in there, fighting the beast, fighting the alpha. He was doing it to protect me. The thought was a warm ache under the cold fear. Then Roderick shifted his weight, and the moment shattered. The sting of that night still felt fresh. A few days later, I stood at the southern border, my boots sinking into the damp earth. It smelled like rain and rotting pine. Chloe was supposed to be here by now. She needed those herbs for her brother. My own hands felt empty and useless. I scanned the darkening woods for any sign of her. I saw her then. Chloe crept between the thick pines with her woven basket. Her steps were careful, but every movement seemed too loud. A sharp crack cut the quiet. Two large men stepped onto the narrow path, Roderick's enforcers. They blocked her way completely. Chloe froze. Her hands tightened on the basket handle until her fingers turned white. Trespassing, the taller one growled. His voice was flat. Alpha Roderick's orders, you're coming with us. Chloe took a step back. The other man moved fast. He grabbed her arm above the elbow. Her basket fell. The green herbs spilled across the wet dirt. She tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. I started forward from the trees without a plan. The second enforcer turned his head. He looked right at my hiding place. He smiled a slow, cruel smile. He knew I was there. They dragged her toward the distant pack house. Chloe stopped struggling. Her face changed from fear to a terrible understanding. She looked over her shoulder directly at me. The message was clear. This wasn't just a capture. They were using my friend as bait. The enforcer who had smiled called out. His voice carried easily through the still air. Tell your alpha his cooperation has a price. The human's safety depends on it. Then they were gone, taking Chloe with them. I was left alone with the crushed herbs at my feet. I turned and started back toward Kalen's cabin. The way that enforcer had smiled, the way he'd known I was there. It moved with me, a cold shadow I couldn't shake. The echo of Chloe's shout was still stuck in my throat. Back in my cabin, I stared at a single candle until my eyes hurt. The knock on my door wasn't a surprise. I opened it to Kalen. He stood there alone, his face a hard line. He looked past me into the room. He pointed to a chair by my small table. It was far from where he stood in the doorway. I sat. He stayed on his feet, looking anywhere but at me. He moved to the shelf. He poured a cup of water from my pitcher. He brought it to me without a word. As he set it down, I saw it, a slight tremor in his fingers. The water rippled against the clay edge. The mighty alpha was nervous. It wasn't about the pack. It wasn't about Roderick. It was about this moment, about me. That tremor was a crack in the stone of him. I forgot my anger for a second. I just watched. He spoke to the wall behind me. I do not want you hurt. His voice was low. Then he shook his head like he was angry at the words. He turned his back to me. His shoulders were tense under his dark shirt. He braced one hand flat against my rough wall. I do not want anyone hurt because of this, he said, quieter. Because of me. It was an honest thing. He hadn't meant to say it. The silence that followed was thick. I stood up from the chair. I was close enough now to see the tight line of his jaw. I could hear the steady sound of his breathing. He half turned, and his shoulder almost brushed against mine. He did not move away. I did not step back. We stood there frozen. The candle light flickered over us both. I could feel the heat from his arm near mine. My own breath caught. I waited for him to speak, to move, to do anything. He stayed perfectly still. The air in the room felt heavy and full. Something was about to happen, or it was. The weight of that almost moment held us both. My jaw ached from clenching it. I stepped into the pack hall courtyard. The cold flagstones seeped through my thin boots. A partial moon cast weak light over the pack. They stood in a loose circle, their faces shadowed and watchful. Kalen waited for me at the center. He wore his dark coat, his posture rigid. He offered his arm to me, in front of everyone. His scent, pine and storm, washed over me. My pulse jumped. I forced myself to slide my hand into the crook of his elbow. The wool of his sleeve was rough under my fingers. I tried to pull away inside. I tried to hate him for this. But my body relaxed against my will, leaning into the solid strength of his arm. A small, pained sound escaped my lips. Around us, the pack watched in absolute silence. Roderick stood at the front of the crowd. His cold gray eyes tracked every move we made. I kept my own eyes forward on the arch of trees beyond the courtyard. Kalen looked down at me then. His stern mask slipped for a second. I saw the tight skin around his eyes. "Just a little longer," he whispered. "Only for me?" His thumb brushed once over the back of my hand. The gentle touch sent a shock up my arm. It was a careful touch, not a possessive one. I didn't know what to do with that difference, so I said nothing. I just let my hand stay in his. Roderick sneered from the crowd. His voice cut through the quiet. "A pretty show, but we all felt you tried to reject the bond at the ceremony, Kalen." He took a step forward, his silver ring glinting. "Your hold is weaker than you pretend." Kalen's arm held me close against his side. But was he acting for the pack, or for himself? His hand tightened over mine, a silent answer. That's when I saw him, the smiling enforcer from the woods. He stood behind Roderick. He held Chloe's radio loosely in one hand. My stomach dropped. That was how he'd known I was there. Chloe must have dropped it. Kalen kept my hand firmly in his, facing the challenge. He did not let go. The memory of Roderick's grip still cinched my wrist. I blinked against the first cold needles of the storm. The wind was a rising moan through the trees. I turned back toward the cabin door. That's when I caught the scent on the wind. It was sharp, like ozone and wet fur, and it was not Kalen's. Kalen was suddenly beside me. He moved without a sound from the deeper shadows of the porch. His arm shot out to block my path to the door. His focus was absolute, aimed into the swirling dark. I saw the line of his throat. The muscle there worked hard, like he was swallowing back a growl. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that. Then a figure stepped from between the pines. Roderick stood at the edge of the clearing. Rain slicked his dark hair against his skull. "You patrol your borders poorly, Thorn," Roderick called out. His voice cut through the storm's noise. "A storm makes for fine hunting. The weak hide and the strong take what they want." Kalen stepped down from the porch. He placed his body between me and Roderick. The rain soaked through his shirt in seconds, plastering it to the scar across his chest. "You are on my land," Kalen said. His voice was low, but it carried a vibration I felt in my own bones. "The challenge is set for the full moon. This is cowardice." "The challenge is for territory," Roderick said. He took another step forward. His cold gray eyes slid past Kalen to find me. "But I'm here for a different prize. I wonder how strong your claim really is. I can smell the conflict on you. It makes you slow." Kalen's whole body went still. It wasn't the stillness of calm. It was the stillness of a spring coiled to the breaking point. I saw his fingers curl. The blunt tips dug into his own palms. He wanted to lunge. I knew it with a sudden, certain clarity, but he held his ground. He shielded the cabin. He shielded me. That was why my hand was halfway to his in the frozen dark. Not because I wanted him, but because he was the only wall between us and the chaos he represented. A terrible cracking sound tore the sky. It wasn't thunder. A tall pine at the edge of the clearing groaned and began to fall. It happened so fast. The trunk snapped and pitched toward the cabin. Kalen spun. His decision was made in an instant. He didn't go after Roderick. He grabbed me around the waist and hauled me back, away from the porch. The tree crashed down. The world went dark as the yellow window light vanished. The power line was severed. In that new, roaring blackness, Roderick's laugh was the last thing I heard before he melted back into the storm. Why my hand was halfway to his in the frozen dark. I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. The cold sting of the rain still clung to my skin like a second, clammy layer. Inside the dark cabin, the sudden absence of the generator's hum made the crackle of the dying fireplace seem deafening. Kalen was a dark shape moving past the window. He was checking the damage from the fallen tree. I stood by the fireplace and tried to stop my shivering. Another crack of thunder shook the old walls. I hated storms. My breath hitched before I could stop it. He came back inside. He shut the door against the wind. He looked at me standing there. I saw him take in my clenched fists and the way I held myself too still. He didn't say anything about it. He walked to the coat rack and took down his heavy wool coat. He held it out to me. His face was unreadable in the firelight. I stared at the offered coat. My pride said to refuse it. The chill in my bones said otherwise. I thought about my hand still in his after Chloe's radio was found. It was the same kind of moment, a choice that felt like surrender but didn't have to be. I took the coat from him. The weight of it was immense and warm from his body. I pulled it around my shoulders. He sat on the floor near the hearth, not in a chair. He left space beside him. It was an invitation, not an order. I sat down too, leaving a careful foot of cold floorboards between us. The fire warmed my front. His coat warmed my back. We watched the flames in silence for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low. "The first storm after my father died," he said. He stopped. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking into the fire. I hid in the root cellar for hours. I was 15. I thought the thunder was the sound of the world ending. I turned my head to look at him. This was the man who commanded a pack. He had just told me he was once a scared boy. His shoulders were loose. The line of his jaw was soft in the flickering light. I didn't know what to say. The space between us on the floor felt smaller. The air felt thicker. I could feel the pull to close that gap. It was a warmth in my chest, not a command. I didn't move. He didn't either. We just sat there, with everything we weren't saying hanging in the air between the cracks of thunder. The lingering warmth of his coat still hugged my shoulders like a shield. I found myself standing in the cabin's single bedroom doorway. My fingers traced the cold, rough grain of the wooden frame. The storm outside battered the small window. Kalen stood behind me. His large form filled the narrow hall. He looked past me into the room. His eyes settled on the one bed. It was small and covered with a worn quilt. "You'll take the bed," he said. His voice was low. "Where will you sleep?" I asked. "The floor is fine." I turned and looked at the bare wood floor between us and the main room. It was hard and cold. I knew it was unacceptable for an alpha. It was a deliberate slight. I felt a twist of obligation in my chest. He hadn't chosen me, but the bond had. There was a difference. That difference meant I couldn't let him lie there. "The floor is freezing," I said. "The bed is big enough for 2 people to not touch." He was quiet for a long moment. He studied my face. His own was shadowed in the dim light from the hearth. Then he looked down at his own hands. He turned them over, staring at his palms. He let out a slow breath I hadn't realized he was holding. "If I get in that bed, Alara, I can't promise what will happen." His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. I saw the faint tremor in his fingers before he curled them into fists. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the wrong thing. "You can control yourself," I said. It sounded like a challenge. He didn't answer. He just walked past me into the room. He sat on the far edge of the bed with his back to me. He pulled off his boots. The simple act felt more intimate than anything before. I slipped out of his coat and hung it on the door. I moved to the other side. I lay down stiffly, facing the wall. I felt the mattress dip under his weight. The space between us was only inches. I could feel the heat coming off his body. I could hear every shift of the fabric. We lay like that back to back for what felt like hours. The wind howled outside. I was sure he was awake too. The tension was a live wire between our spines. My own breathing seemed too loud. Then he moved. It was just a slight turn of his head. I felt the brush of his hair against the pillow near mine. I stopped breathing. The bond between us pulled like a deep physical ache. It was a force that wanted to close that gap. My hand, resting near my face, twitched. I remembered why my hand was halfway to his in the frozen dark. It was the same reason I didn't get up now. The power in the room had shifted. It was no longer his alone. I pushed the thought aside. The next afternoon, a dull ache sat in my lower back from a night of rigid stillness. I stepped into a hidden clearing, and the sharp scent of pine cut through the fog in my head. Chloe was already there. She stood by a fallen log, her blonde bob messy. Her silver locket caught the light. She didn't say hello. She just grabbed my hand and shoved a crumpled note into my palm. Her fingers were cold and they trembled. "Read it," she whispered. Her voice was tight. "Now before anyone comes." A squirrel rustled in the branches above and we both flinched. I could feel her fear. I turned away and smoothed the note on my thigh. The paper was cheap and thin. I read lists of names I didn't recognize, dates from last month, dollar amounts. My breath hitched. I stared at the columns of numbers. At the bottom was a crude map. One area was circled in shaky pen. I didn't understand, but a cold dread started in my stomach. Chloe leaned close. She pointed a shaking finger at 2 words scribbled in the margin. Moonlight and taken. Her eyes were wide. It's a business, she whispered. Roderick's business. He's not just a rival alpha, he's taking people, forcing them, he sells them. The horror of it washed over me. I looked toward the pack compound. I could hear faint voices. Kalen was in there. He was laughing with his enforcers. He trusted Roderick to follow the rules. My stomach turned. I was just one person. What could I possibly do alone? I crumpled the note into a tight ball. You have to stop, I said. My own voice sounded strange. This is too dangerous. Come back to the cabin with me now. She shook her head, her jaw set. One last lead, she insisted. The coordinates are on the back. I have to see it for myself. Before I could argue, she turned and melted into the trees. I was left alone with the coordinates burning in my hand and the sound of the wind. The chill of the woods still clung to my skin like a damp glove. Back in the cabin, the fire crackled in the hearth. I found Kalen standing by the fireplace. He was staring into the flames, his back rigid. I went straight to him and put myself in his line of sight. Chloe's radio went silent over an hour ago, I said. My voice was too loud. I have her last coordinates. I need to go find her now. Kalen turned his head slowly. His amber eyes caught the firelight. No, he said. The word was flat and final. The contested woods are not safe after dark. Roderick's wolves are hunting there. I don't care, I said. I stepped closer. You can't keep me here. She is my best friend. I reached out and gripped his forearm. The muscle there was hard as rock. He didn't pull away. He just looked down at my hand on his arm. You are my mate, he said, his voice low. That is why I cannot let you walk into a trap. Roderick would use you against me. I saw his free hand curl into a loose fist at his side. He was holding himself very still. You keep saying I'm your mate, not your prisoner, I shot back. My fear for Chloe sharpened my words. Prove it. Let me go. A strange expression crossed his face then. It was not anger. It looked like exhaustion. The fire popped. Do you think this is easy? He asked. The question seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised me. His voice lost its edge. This weight. Every decision I make could get someone killed. If I let you go and you are taken, that is on me. If I keep you here and your friend is hurt, that is also on me. He leaned in a little, his face close to mine. The only thing I know for sure is that I cannot lose you. We were inches apart. I could feel the warmth coming from him. I saw his eyes drop to my mouth for a single heartbeat. My own breath caught. The way he'd looked at me just then wasn't the bond. I didn't know what to do with that. Then he straightened up and took a full step back. The space between us felt suddenly cold. He turned his face toward the fire again, his profile stern. I will send my best trackers at first light, he said. His tone was all alpha again, but it sounded hollow. You will stay here. I didn't move. I just watched the tense line of his shoulders. My hand still felt the phantom warmth of his arm. I understood then why my hand had twitched toward his in the dark. It was not a pull toward his power. It was a pull toward the man who carried that weight alone and hated it. One thing kept pulling at me, the phantom warmth of his arm on my hand. The pressure of Kalen's words sat like a cold stone behind my ribs. I stood at the tree line, my boots sinking into the soft earth. I stared into the dark. The coordinates Chloe gave me burned a hole in my pocket. I waited until the deep quiet of true night fell over the cabin. Then I climbed out the bedroom window. The drop was farther than I thought. A jolt shot up my legs when I landed. A sharper, hotter pain bloomed right under my sternum. It stole my breath for a second. I leaned against the rough cabin siding. This was the cost of defiance. The bond did not like me leaving. I pushed off and ran for the trees. The forest swallowed me whole. Every rustle in the underbrush sounded like a footstep. A low howl cut through the still air. It was close. Kalen's patrol was on its regular sweep. I ducked behind a wide pine tree. Its bark was sticky with sap. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to make my breathing slow and quiet. The howl came again from a different direction now. They were circling. I pressed my forehead against the cold, sticky bark. My chest ached with a hollow pull, urging me back toward the cabin. A heavy crunch of leaves sounded to my left. A large, dark shape moved between the distant trunks. It was coming toward my hiding spot. I sank down slowly, pulling my knees tight to my chest. The damp forest floor seeped cold through my jeans. The shadow stopped. It lifted its head. I heard a low, wet sniffing sound. It had my scent. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was caught. Running was pointless. The shadow shifted, resolving into the form of a massive wolf. It was one of Kalen's enforcers. It stared right at me. Then it turned its head and looked back the way it came. It hesitated. After a long moment, it turned and melted back into the trees without a sound. It had seen me. It had let me go. I stayed there for a full minute, stunned. Then I understood. The enforcer had recognized my scent as the alpha's mate. He had chosen not to stop me. That small rebellion was a crack in Kalen's command. I stood up, my legs shaky. The pain in my chest was a dull throb now, a tether stretching thin. I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket. I moved deeper into the woods, following the numbers. I found the hidden clearing Chloe described. It was empty, but trampled into the mud near a lightning-struck oak was her satchel, its contents spilled. Next to it, half buried under leaves, was a small, black radio. Its casing was cracked. I picked it up. This was what she had come for. This was what Roderick's men were taking from people. What was on the broken radio I held in my hand? I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. My knuckles still ached from clenching them so tightly as I ran. I stumbled into the moonlit clearing, its air thick with the scent of damp, decaying leaves. I scanned the dark tree line, my heart pounding in my ears. Chloe's satchel sat abandoned near a fallen log. The broken radio was gone. I took a step forward and a sharp pain shot up my side from my earlier injury. I ignored it. "Chloe," I called out, my voice too loud in the silent woods. A figure stepped from the shadows between two tall pines. It was Chloe, her blonde bob messy and her face pale. She wore her grandmother's locket. Relief washed over me for 1 second. Then I saw her wide, terrified eyes. She gave a tiny, frantic shake of her head. My relief turned to ice in my stomach. I heard the soft crunch of boots behind me. I spun around. Roderick Vancourt, the rival alpha, stood there with a cruel smile. 3 large men flanked him, their postures tense and ready. "You found your little friend," Roderick said. His voice was calm. It made everything worse. "But you walked right into my parlor, Elara. I knew you would. Loyalty is such a predictable flaw." He looked at Chloe, then back at me. His cold gray eyes held a terrible calculation. He hadn't chosen me, something else had put us here. There was a difference. That thought flashed through my mind, bitter and clear. This wasn't about fate, this was a business transaction. "Let her go," I said. My own voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Oh, she's free to leave," Roderick said. He gestured toward Chloe. "But you're not. You see, an unclaimed mate of a ruling alpha is a rare commodity. There are buyers who pay a fortune for such a prize." The horror of his words sank in, cold and heavy. This was bigger than a pack challenge. He was a trafficker. Chloe was just the bait. I took a step back, but the men behind Roderick moved to block my escape. My determination wavered, replaced by a rising, choking fear. But why he'd called loyalty my predictable flaw, I still had no answer for that. The cold mud still clung to my knees, a frigid armor from the forest floor. My new reality began with the oppressive scent of polished oak and bergamot in Kalen's silent quarters. He stood by the heavy desk, his back to me. The alpha, Kalen Thorne, was a statue carved from shadow and tension. I waited for the storm, for the command, for the fury my escape deserved. His shoulders dropped a fraction, a slow release of air I felt more than heard. "The radio," he said. His voice was low, stripped of its usual force. He still did not turn. "Chloe's radio, you had it in your hand when I found you in the woods." I remembered the broken plastic casing, the static hiss. I had clutched it like a lifeline. It was dead, just noise. "No," he finally turned. The amber eyes that usually pinned me were dull, fixed on a point past my shoulder. "It was. My enforcers swept the frequency after you left. They found a recorded loop, a message for me." He paused, and his next words were soft. It was Roderick's voice. He was counting down the minutes until you'd reach Chloe's coordinates. The understanding was a cold stone in my stomach. My defiance had been their script. I walked right into it. I made myself ask, "How did you know where to find me?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then his hand came up, not in a fist, but open. He pressed his palm flat against the center of his chest, right over the old claw mark scar. "I didn't track you by scent or sound," he said. I just knew the bond. It went silent, then it screamed. He looked at me then, really looked, and his face was bare. It felt like a hole opening up inside my ribs. He was across the room in 3 strides, stopping an arm's length away. The heat from his body reached me. The pull between us was a live wire, humming with a warmth that ached. I could see the rapid beat of his pulse at the base of his throat. My own breath hitched in answer. He lifted his hand, slow, as if to touch my face. His fingers stopped just short of my cheek. I felt the air move against my skin. His eyes searched mine, and in them I saw no alpha, no command. Only a terrible, open fear. His hand fell back to his side. The space between us was filled with everything we did not say, everything else I could deal with. Why his hand stopped just short of my cheek was different. The ghost of that look clung to the back of my throat like cold ash. My boots hit the frost-hardened earth of the clearing. The silence there wasn't an absence. It was a presence, thick and smothering. Roderick Vancourt stepped from the trees behind me. His enforcers moved at the edges of the clearing. They formed a loose circle with no openings. "You look tired," Roderick said. His voice was flat and conversational. It was worse than a shout. He watched me the way a man watches a tool he's about to pick up. My side ached where one of his wolves had struck me. The cold air burned in my lungs. "Let Chloe go," I said. My voice sounded thin. "You have me." "I do," he agreed. He took a step closer. The silver ring on his finger, made from a rival's fang, caught the weak light. "But the condition was your voluntary surrender. You came here under your own power, but you are not surrendering. You are still defying me. I can see it in your stance." He was right. Every part of me was wound-tight, ready to run or fight. I had nothing left for either. My legs trembled from the effort of just standing. I thought of Kalen then, not as the alpha, but as the man who had looked at me with raw terror in his own quiet room. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that. But in that moment, his fear had been so human it hurt. The memory brought a flicker of warmth to my chest, a stupid, dangerous ache. Roderick saw the shift in my face. His eyes narrowed. "He called loyalty my predictable flaw," Roderick said, smiling a little. He took another step. His enforcers tightened the circle. "He was right. You came for your friend. You would die for your friend. That makes you easy to trap." The truth of it was a physical blow. My loyalty had been the lever he used to move me exactly here. My independence, my defiance, had delivered me to him. I had built a wall of it between me and Kalen, and Roderick had just walked me through the gate. My strength left me all at once. The last of my defiance shattered. I was just a woman in a frozen clearing, out of moves. Hope was a desperate, terrifying thing. I closed my eyes. I stopped fighting the bond. I stopped fighting the pull toward Kalen. I let go of my stubborn need to do everything alone. I sent a silent, wordless cry for help into that empty space inside me where the bond lived. I surrendered to it. Something clicked into place deep in my core. It was a lock turning open. A sudden, rushing warmth flooded my chest, so intense it stole my breath. It wasn't my own. It was an answer. The bond was no longer a silent void. It was a live wire, and on the other end I felt a surge of pure, focused rage that was not my own. Roderick, who had been watching me with cool triumph, froze. His head snapped up. He looked into the woods behind me past the tree line. His cruel smile vanished. His hand, which had been relaxed at his side, curled slowly into a fist. He looked at me again, and for the first time, I saw real uncertainty in his cold gray eyes. Whatever came next, why his hand curled into a fist instead of drawing his weapon, was the part I hadn't figured out. The raw, silent scream in my throat still vibrated in my bones. I stumbled into the torchlight of the Thornhaven clearing, my boots sinking into earth churned soft by 100 dancing feet. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp fur. Every pack member was there, a tight circle around the central stone. Kalen, my alpha, stood opposite Roderick. The rival alpha held a ceremonial silver blade. His cruel face was a mask of triumph. Chloe was nowhere I could see. My stomach twisted. I knew I was the prize in this ugly game. Roderick, the challenger, raised his voice so it carried. "The human stain is here," he said. He pointed the blade at me. "Look at her, Thorn. She reeks of your weakness. Your beast chose a fragile thing from outside our laws. Give her to me now. I will cleanse this shame from our kind." His demand hung in the smoky air. The pack watched, their loyalty a brittle thing. I was terrified. My breath came in short, sharp bursts that hurt my ribs. I forced myself to stand straight. Kalen took a single step forward. His shoulders were locked tight. He said one word. "No." It landed in the clearing like a stone. "She stays. She's under my protection." I looked at his hands. They were clenched at his sides, his fingertips pressed white into his palms. This wasn't an alpha giving an order. This was a man holding himself back from something much worse. A flicker of warmth pulsed behind my ribs, the bond. It was a quiet, steady beat against all the chaos. Roderick smiled. It was a cold and terrible thing. Then you choose war? He turned the silver knife in his hand. The firelight caught the edge. I'll take your lands. I'll break your pack. And I'll take her anyway. Her blood will make my claim complete. He took a step toward me. The circle of wolves tightened. I got it then. My freedom was gone. But my choice wasn't. Before Kaelin could move, before Roderick could take another step, I walked forward. I put myself right between them. I turned to face Roderick, shielding Kaelin with my own body. A shocked gasp went through the crowd. I did it because the thought of leaving him to face this alone was suddenly unthinkable. My palms still throbbed from the pressure of pushing against two walls of muscle. The door to Kaelin's quarters clicked shut behind me. The room smelled of old pine and lonely authority. A single lamp lit the space. Kaelin stood by the cold hearth. He wasn't looking at me. He was rolling his right shoulder in a slow, stiff circle. I'd never seen him make that small, pained motion before. It was the only sound besides my own heart. You shouldn't have done that, I said. My voice was flat. He stopped. His hands went to his belt. He unfastened it with a sharp tug and let it drop to the floor. It was a careless, ordinary thing. It wasn't a choice, he said. He finally turned. The lamplight cut deep lines beside his mouth. When you stepped forward, something in me just moved. I crossed my arms tight. I was scared. My hands were steady, which felt like a lie. You overrode the ceremony. You risked everything. I know what I risked. He took one step toward me. Then he stopped. The space between us felt thick. You asked me once why my hand curled into a fist instead of drawing my weapon. I waited. I didn't breathe. It was because I was afraid of what the weapon would do, he said. His voice was low and rough. Not to him, to me, to what it would make me become for you. The bond was a quiet warmth in my ribs now, not a command. It pulled me toward him. I held my ground. I made myself look at his face, at the honest weariness there. He looked away first. He ran a hand over the back of his head. You should rest. The room is yours tonight. He meant for me to take the bed. He would take the floor. He started to turn toward the door. Kaelin. The name left my mouth before I could stop it. He went very still. He didn't turn back. He just waited. The silence in the room was a living thing. I had nothing else to say. I just couldn't let him walk out. The phantom pressure of his forehead against mine felt like a brand. I found myself standing outside the healer's hut. The only sound was the crunch of frost under my boots. I'd walked here without thinking, pulled by an invisible string. Chloe waited inside. Her face was pale in the lamplight. She held a bundle of herbs tight against her chest. She looked at me with wide, knowing eyes. She saw the change. We have to go, Chloe said. Her voice was a tight whisper. Right now, while they're all still talking about what he did. She meant Kaelin. She meant his public claim. I looked past her into the dark trees. Somewhere out there, the alpha was dealing with the consequences of his instinct. A part of me ached to know what he was doing. The feeling was a warm, unwanted stone in my stomach. I turned back to Chloe. Her knuckles were white. My own hands felt empty. I had no weapon, no plan, only this new and terrible gravity holding me to this place. The old rules were broken. My independence was a memory. I opened my mouth to tell her we could run, but the words died in my throat. The bond went taut. A silent alarm. Someone was coming. The sting of crushed wolfsbane was still on my palms, a faint green tingle against my skin. I blinked into the compound's gloom. The air smelled like old blood and damp earth. Then a guard lunged from a side corridor. He came at me with a snarl. I pivoted and drove my shoulder into his chest. The impact jarred my whole spine. I heard the breath leave his lungs in a wet rush. More guards poured in behind him. The narrow hallway became a crush of bodies. Kaelin roared from my left side. His voice was raw with fury. He shoved me hard behind him, toward an open cell block door. His palm was rough and warm against my back for 1 second. Then an iron gate dropped from the ceiling with a deafening crash. It slammed down between us. Kaelin was trapped on the other side with most of the guards. I clawed at the cold bars. My eyes were wide with a panic I couldn't control. I saw him through the gate. His amber eyes found mine across the chaos. He didn't look afraid. He looked resolved. He pointed a single finger down the dark hall I was trapped in. Then he shaped a word with his mouth. Go. His hand flattened against the gate on his side. It wasn't a gesture of defeat. It was a silent push. I turned and ran into the dark. The corridor was lined with rusted cages. A low moaning came from inside them. In the third cell, I saw a flash of blonde hair, a silver locket. It was Chloe. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Her hands wrapped around the bars when she saw me. Then I heard a smooth voice from the shadows ahead. Roderick Vancourt, the rival alpha, stepped into the dim light. His cruel smile showed his teeth. He held a heavy chain in one hand. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me at Chloe in her cage. His gray eyes were cold and calculating. Chloe's own eyes met mine. They held a terrible understanding. She gave a small, sharp nod. Then she screamed, "Roderick, let her go, take me instead." She rattled the cage door with a force that shook the entire frame. My ears were still ringing from the gate crashing down. I stumbled forward, my palm hitting a cold, wet metal beam. The fighting had pushed Kalen and me apart. I saw him across the chaos, his focus split between the rogue wolves and where I was. He moved like a predator, but his shoulders were rigid. It wasn't just about the fight. It was about the distance between us. I looked for Chloe. She was still in her cage. Her eyes were wide and fixed on me. She rattled the cage door again, hard. The whole panel next to her shook. That's when I saw Roderick coming through the dark trees behind her. He wasn't running. He walked with a calm that was worse than a charge. Chloe saw him too. Her face went pale. She stopped shaking the door. Instead, she turned and slammed her whole body against the control panel on the wall beside her cage. It sparked and died with a sharp pop. Every cage door in the row sprang open with a metallic clang. Prisoners flooded out into the chaos. Roderick's calm shattered. He shouted orders, but they were lost in the sudden roar. Chloe didn't run with them. She darted to an abandoned guard post. She grabbed a satchel from a hook and clutched it to her chest like it was a treasure. Then she looked right at me. She gave one sharp, determined nod. The ceiling above us let out a long, tearing scream of stressed metal. Dust and debris rained down. A beam buckled near Roderick, forcing him back. The power shift wasn't in a challenge or a bite. It was in a human girl with a satchel, choosing to break the system instead of just escaping it. What she'd put in that satchel? I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. The metallic taste of panic was still in my mouth, thick and sour. I found myself wedged in a pocket of dusty air. The only light was a single crack slicing through the rubble above me. I shifted, and grit scraped under my palms. A low groan came from my right, beyond a fallen beam. I knew that sound. I crawled toward it, ignoring the hot pain in my side. I found Kalen in a dim pocket of the collapsed chamber. He was leaning hard against a tilted slab of concrete. His hand was pressed to his ribs. Dark blood seeped between his fingers. I rushed to him. My hands went to his side to check the wound. The fabric of his shirt was wet and warm. He flinched. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was rough and thin. He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the unstable pile of debris that sealed us in. His breathing was too quick, too shallow. I saw the fear in his eyes then. It wasn't about the wound. It wasn't about the trap. It was something worse. "It's just us," I whispered. His shoulders slumped. He finally turned his face toward mine. His eyes were wide and lost. The way he looked at me just then. It wasn't the bond. I didn't know what to do with that. I reached up slowly. My thumb brushed the dust from his cheekbone. He closed his eyes. He leaned into my touch just a fraction. His own hand came up and covered mine, holding it there against his skin. His palm was cold. "I thought I lost you," he said. The words were raw. When the wall came down, I felt it, a hole opening up inside my ribs where you should have been. "I'm here," I said. My own fear was a cold stone in my stomach. Not fear of him, fear of the bond's power. Fear of wanting this anchor when I had fought so hard to be free. "I was afraid," he admitted. His voice dropped to a whisper I had to strain to hear. "At the ceremony, when I refused him, it wasn't just about protecting you. I was afraid I wasn't strong enough, that my choice would get everyone killed." I understood then, the weight he carried. It wasn't a crown. It was a chain. I moved my hand from his cheek to his shoulder. I felt the hard muscle there, tight with strain. "You don't have to be strong alone," I said. It felt like the truest thing I had ever said to him. He looked at me for a long moment. He searched my face. He didn't answer. He just nodded once, a slow dip of his chin. He didn't let go of my other hand. We stayed like that in the dusty half-light. The world was broken above us. But here, in this small space, something shifted. It was quiet. It was almost enough. But I pushed it aside. What Alara had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening, it would come back. The phantom pressure of his forehead against mine still lingered on my skin as I stepped over the threshold into the central chamber. The air was thick with the chalky taste of pulverized stone. Roderick, the rogue alpha, rose from the rubble across the room. His gray eyes locked onto Kaelin with pure hate. He did not look at me. I was just an obstacle. He lunged at Kaelin. His claws aimed for my alpha's throat. The movement was a blur of rage. I did not think. I shoved Kaelin hard to the side. A searing line of pain opened up my forearm. I felt the warm rush of blood under my sleeve. Kaelin made a sound I had never heard from him. It was a raw roar of fury that shook dust from the ceiling. He moved faster than I could track. His hand closed around Roderick's throat. He slammed the other alpha back against a broken support beam. The metal groaned under the impact. I did not wait for an opening. I dropped and swept my leg out. My boot connected hard with the back of Roderick's knees. He buckled forward with a grunt of surprise. His balance was gone for only a second, but it was enough. We moved as one then. It was not a plan. It was a knowing. As Kaelin forced Roderick down onto the grit-covered floor, I was already there. I placed my palm flat on the center of his chest. I pressed down with all my weight. My injured arm throbbed. Kaelin's grip on his throat did not loosen. Our combined force held him pinned. He struggled once, a final heave of muscle, and then he went still. His eyes were wide. They darted from Kaelin's face to mine. He saw the synced rhythm of our breathing. He saw the way Kaelin's free hand hovered near my shoulder, not to control, but to guard. A flicker of warmth passed between Kaelin and me through the bond, a quiet acknowledgement amid the violence. Roderick's confident sneer was gone. In its place was a hollow shock. He had been wrong. The bond was not a weakness. It was a force he could never understand. Why his eyes had gone so hollow when he saw our bond? I wasn't going to like the answer. My knuckles throbbed with a deep, bone-deep ache from the final impact. I found myself in a cramped, windowless room where the only light came from a single, flickering bulb hanging from a wire. Kaelin pulled the door shut behind us. The sound of the compound's chaos became muffled. He leaned against the metal door for a moment. The shelves around us held dusty cleaning supplies. The air smelled of bleach and rust. I pressed a clean cloth against a cut on my arm. I winced as the pressure bit. Kaelin moved closer. He took the cloth from my hand without a word. His hands were large and calloused. He cleaned the wound with careful precision. His touch was far gentler than I expected from a man of his size. I watched his face in the flickering light. A thin line of sweat traced his temple. His fingers trembled slightly against my skin as he worked. "I thought I'd lost you in the fight," he said. He kept his eyes on my arm. His voice was low and rough. It was not a statement an alpha should make. It was too honest. He hadn't chosen me, the bond had. There was a difference, but this felt like a choice. I reached out slowly. My fingertips brushed a dark bruise forming along his jaw. He went completely still. Then he leaned into my touch for one single second. He let out a shaky breath I felt against my palm. Our faces were inches apart in the quiet room. I could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. He held his breath. The bond between us was a warm, steady pull in my chest. It was not a command. It was an invitation. I saw the answer to my old question then. I saw why his eyes had gone so hollow when he first saw our bond. It was not about power or possession. It was the terror of having something so vital he could still fail to protect. I pulled my hand back. The space between us felt vast and fragile. He did not close it. I did not either. We just stood there, breathing the same bleach-scented air, holding the almost moment between us. That question, why he'd flinched at my touch on the bruise, sat there like something unfinished. The ghost of his hands tightening the bandage around my ribs lingered in the dull, constant ache beneath my skin. At the tree line, I tasted the coming rain on the wind, a damp charge that sharpened the scent of pine and damp earth. Chloe was safe in the car we had taken from the compound. But police sirens wailed in the distance, a human problem I could not solve. Kaelin the alpha stood beside me scanning the dark woods. I saw other wolves then, just shapes between the distant trees. They were watching us. "The whole pack saw us," I said. My voice was tight from the pain in my side. I kept my eyes on those distant, shifting shadows. The sirens were getting closer, a sound that didn't belong in our world. My side ached, a dull reminder of everything that had just happened. And the pack was still out there, watching from the shadows between the trees. Kaelin's shoulders tensed under his torn shirt. He didn't look away from the woods. "They saw me fight beside you," he said, his voice carrying on the wet air. "They felt the bond answer when I touched you. They know." He finally turned to me. His face was serious. "The old rules, they're clear. They say I should command you to leave now, to hide my weakness. He didn't give the order. He just looked at me, his eyes asking a silent question. I met his gaze. I didn't look down. The choice was his, pack or me. He reached out slowly, his movement careful. He didn't touch my bandaged ribs. His fingers just brushed a streak of dirt from my cheekbone instead. The touch was light, but it sent a current of warmth straight through my chest. I didn't move away. I flinched before, he said, his voice low, because I thought I had to be stone. I thought any crack, any softness, would ruin everything. His hand dropped back to his side. You proved me wrong. The pack doesn't need a statue. It needs a leader who can stand beside his equal. He faced the woods again, his posture straight. He raised his voice just enough to carry to the trees. Thornhaven sees its alpha. A pause, the wind stilled. It sees his mate. He let the words hang there. Let every wolf who watches understand this. The shapes in the trees didn't move, but I felt it. Their attention sharpened like a held breath. Kalen looked back at me, and for the first time I saw no conflict in his eyes, no war between duty and the bond. We go back together, he said, quiet now just for me, or we don't go back at all. So, that's my story. The mate-finding ceremony, the public rejection, the bloody claiming, and the night everything finally broke open. I'm back at the Packlands now. It's complicated. Some of the elders aren't thrilled, but Kalen meant what he said. We're a package deal. The bond isn't a chain. It's not a command. It's this quiet, steady warmth in my chest that feels like coming home. And the alpha who thought he had to be perfect, he's learning to be real instead. But I'll leave you with this. When you find something real, something that terrifies you because it matters so much, do you hide it to keep it safe? Or do you stand in the open with it and let the world adjust? If you've ever had to make that choice, you know how loud the silence can be right before you answer. If you want to hear more stories about finding your place when the whole world seems set against it, hit subscribe. I might just have a few more tales to tell.